So, 1 Samuel then opens with the birth of Samuel, and you have all the history of his birth, and you go into 2 chapter 3, you have the Lord's calling of Samuel when Samuel was a little boy, or a youth. Calls him out. And then we have chapter 3, starting in verse 19. And this is really where the story begins. Chapter 3 of 1 Samuel, starting in verse 19, says, "The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word." So we have the last judge. We have the last of the prophets. You okay? Okay. And God's with him. We're doing okay. None of his words that came out of Samuel's mouth, and none of the prophecies that Samuel said, fell to the ground. God ensured that they took place. And then what is the very next section? What do you see happening in this great time of Israel? What do you have in chapter 4? Philistines take the ark. They conquer the ark. Now, what's the ark? We haven't talked about this much. It's the thing that you touch and you die. Okay, that's one way to look at it.
It's worth it.
They kept the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod, and manna. Yeah, there's a jar of manna in there too. Gotta love kids. Okay, so there's the ark. The ark was what was located inside the Holy of Holies. And between the two cherubim that sat on the mercy seat on the top, that's where God's glory dwelt. So the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies once a year and have that moment with the Lord and then get out. The ark now has been stolen. So the thing that represents the seat of God has been stolen. And the enemy, the pagans, get it. Woohoo! Israel's doing really well right now. So the ark is stolen in chapter 4. Eli, the high priest at that time, and his sons, who are corrupt, they're punished and they die. And the ark goes in chapter 5. Let's go look at that real quickly. Chapter 5, let's start in verse 1. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it to from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. Now, who's Dagon?
False god.
False god, yes. Here we have, now again, I want you to stop for just a moment before we go on. I want you to remember, this is not about Dagon. This is not about a nice little story where the ark is stolen and the ark is recovered. Think bigger.
I just don't know why those people aren't dead, because you had to be like a certain person to even carry the ark.
Well, they may have carried it on poles. I don't know what happened. I don't know how they got it in there, but they do. What happened? I don't want to read it. Somebody tell me what happened.
Dagon fell over.
Yeah, Dagon fell flat on his face.
But it wasn't. He didn't just fall. He was on his face, and that's what I always say.
Yes, he fell over on his face. Now, I've seen pictures, and I may be wrong. This may be something different, but I believe this is correct. The picture of Dagon that I've seen is a body of a fish and the upper torso of a man. So, if this particular statue thing is laying face down, that means its tail and all that weight is in the air. It's this up, you know. This think about it. Think of a sphinx. You know the picture of a sphinx, right? The great sphinx, body of a lion, head of a man. Imagine the great sphinx tilted on its face.
Oh, so you mean he wasn't just prone, it was actually on his face.
He was face down.
Face down, fins up, you're saying?
Yes, because, I mean, here, I'll give you a picture. You got this part, right? All right. Forgive my
Artistic skills. Where's that?
We can always edit it if you make a funny picture.
Oh, is that what that looks like?
Okay.
Like a mermaid.
Like a mermaid, exactly. So here he is. He's on his little pedestal, whatever. And he goes, whap, face down. And that's where he's left. He's left face down. The priests come in the next day, ooh, and they put him back up. I don't know how they put him back up, but they put this big statue back up. Put the big statue up. What happened the next day? Same thing, only what?
His head cut?
His head and hands, right? That's in verse 4. This time, his head's cut off, and his arms and hands are cut off. He's just, huh? Because they're still there. They're just broken on the ground. He's still prone. He's still put on the ground again. So what happens then? What happens then?
They take it back.
They don't take it back. They get afraid. They're scared. They're scared of this God of the Israelites.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So you have in verse 6, the Philistines are trying to return it. It ends up in Kiriath Jearim in chapter 7 for 20 years. Doesn't even get back to the tabernacle. It's left in someone's home. Look in chapter 7, starting in verse 2. It was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim, and all the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourself of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourself to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord only. And sure enough, the ark came back. Now, what did Samuel tell Israel to do?
Get rid of their gods or their idols.
Well, they started mourning. They lost their symbol of power. What is the first thing that he says in verse 3? Before that, there's an if. If you are really turning to the Lord. So 1, return to the Lord.
With all your heart.
With all your heart. What's next?
Get rid of the foreign gods.
Rid yourself of false gods. Let's just say false gods. What else?
Commit to the Lord and serve him only.
Commit to and serve the Lord only. Is there a fourth one? He will deliver you. Very good, Cheyenne. He will deliver you. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? Now go back to Deuteronomy 6. Now go back to Deuteronomy 6. I have a question for you. What does this sound like?
Covenant.
Deuteronomy chapter 6.
This looks like the same thing he's saying with the covenant. Do this and I will do that.
Page 284 in the Black Book. It's very much like the covenant, isn't it? Let's listen to see what Samuel tells the nation to come back to. What is he saying? Where does he get this from? Is this just something that he picked up out of the clear blue, out of nowhere? Starting in verse 4. Starting at verse 4. If you have this book, let me hear you read. Read with me, okay? Ready? You got it? Verse 4, down at the bottom. Chapter 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These are the commandments that I give you today, are to be upon your hearts. Let's stop right there. Jump to verse 13. And we'll read through verse 15. Ready? Fear the Lord your God. Serve Him only, and take your oaths in His name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you. For the Lord your God, who is among you, is a jealous God, and His anger will burn against you, and He will destroy you from the face of the earth. Oh, sorry, my bad. Let's keep going. I want to go until 19. Do not test the Lord your God as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations and decrees He has given you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so that it may go well with you, and you may go in and take over the good land that the Lord promised an oath. Excuse me. Thrusting out all your enemies before you, as the Lord said. How much of what we just read is what Samuel just repeated? All of it. He's going right back to the same thing. God hasn't changed His mind. He's not dealing with Israel any differently. You want me to you want me to deliver you, get rid of your enemies, take care of the Philistines? Then return to the Lord with all your heart. Right? What does it mean to return to the Lord with all your heart? Well, it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. Rid yourself of false gods. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and His anger will burn against you, and He will destroy you from the face of the land. And He will deliver you. He's just repeating the covenant. He's just repeating God's law. It is unchanging. It is forever the same. Very cool.
Forever the same?
Forever the same. God is not changing. So there it is again. God's glory is made known through His deliverance. And what does He do? Sure enough, He does deliver. Go back to 1 Samuel. He does deliver Israel. He delivers Israel through Samuel and through Saul. So the Philistines, they get the ark back. Then chapter 8. And oh, do we have a woe in chapter 8. Israel asks for a king. Why?
Other nations have one.
Very good. Look at verse 4 of chapter 8, 4 and 5. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." What are they asking? What do they want to be?
Like the other guys.
I want to be just like everybody else. I want to be like that guy. I want to be like that nation. Well, I want you to just keep your finger here in 8. Flip over to chapter 12.
Well, in a way, Samuel's going to take part of that because he was getting old, getting ready to die, and he hadn't raised his sons properly, and they didn't want them. So in a way, he's got to take some of that burden.
He probably has to take some of the fault. However, what is God's view? Look over in chapter 12, starting in verse 12. This is Samuel talking to the Israelites. But when you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, was moving against you, you said to me, "No, we want a king to rule over us, even though the Lord your God was your king. Now here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you." So what was it that they were asking? When they said, "Samuel, you're getting old, your sons don't walk in the right way, we appoint us a king." Why were they doing that?
So they can have someone to follow.
They can do their own things again. They do not want to obey God.
What did they reject?
God.
As?
King.
It's the rejection of God as king. God, you ain't getting it. We don't trust you anymore. We saw all those Ammonites and we were afraid. So we don't want you. We want a real king. We want one that we can see, we can touch. We want one that, looks strong, just like the other guys.
We're still like that today. When we walk away from the Lord, we want to do what the other guys are doing. They're
Absolutely.
having so much fun.
Absolutely.
After all.
What does 1 John say? Lovers of the world, they love the world. They want to be like the world. They want to be just like the world. What do you say? We studied it.
Well, did you notice in here that even though he did appoint a king, that he still was basically forgiving of them, because he said, "Okay, here's your king, but as long as you still follow me, everything will be good." So he was suffering in that.
Absolutely, he's God's long suffering in that. Yes, they demanded a king. Yes, they rejected him as king. We don't trust you.
But
he still forgave them. Why? We studied this last time.
Because he loved them.
Because he loved them. He was married to them. It was a forever contract. They didn't go over and he didn't diss them. She was the one, Israel was the one that wanted her own way. But look at 1 John. Or you don't have to look at 1 John, I'll read it. 1 John chapter 2, starting in 15. "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of the eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever." So you have Israel saying, "I want to be like everybody else. I don't trust you, God. I can't see you. I don't know you." I'm thinking is what they're thinking. Do we ever get to a place where we see Ammonites, we see giants, and just toss God aside? I need something serious. What I need really is a life insurance policy. Because if I have a life insurance policy, it'll be all good. So you die, your partner gets a life insurance policy, there's an economic crash, and all of your life insurance policy, the life insurance company goes bankrupt and you get nothing. Good plan. Good plan. Good plan. We put our faith in so many different things other than God. And that's what Israel was doing. We don't trust you. I don't have faith in you. You're not enough. You're not enough. That's be really careful that your actions don't tell God, "God, you're not enough. You are insufficient. I want more."
I don't trust you.
That's what they're saying. Yes, I don't trust you.
I don't think you're going to be able to handle this.
Exactly. So Israel asked for a king. They want to be like the rest of the nations. They fear the Nahash, and that's why. And this meant they didn't trust God. And their request was a rejection of God as their king. So there was a king. Who was the king? God. They say, God, we don't want you to be king anymore. We want we want a human king. And God grants it. He gave them what they deserved. So Israel picks Saul in chapter 9. Saul is made king in chapter 10. Saul rescues the city of Jabesh by the Spirit of God in chapter 11. Samuel gives a farewell speech in chapter 9. Not a farewell speech as in like, I'm not going to be around anymore, but now you got your king, go ahead. Everything's going to go through the king now. Have what you want. And then in chapter 13, we have a problem. Saul's been told in chapter 10, verse 8, by Samuel, go to Gilgal. I think it was Gilgal, is that right? Gilead, and wait for me there 7 days. And I will offer offerings, burnt offerings, and then you can fight. Which is what they're doing. They're fighting. They get there, Samuel's not there yet, and the people start to fear. They once again fear. Where's their faith? Is there faith in the God that parted the Red Sea and wiped out all of Pharaoh's army? No. It's in a king, a human king. They have no faith in the human king. He's done nothing to deserve it. There's no merit in him at all. He's just a king, and all they're seeing is what they see with their eyes. So, Saul assumes the role of priest, prophet, Samuel's role, and says, I can do that. And so he offers the sacrifice. Samuel gets there and says, because you have disobeyed the Lord. And I want to read this, because this is important. Go to 1 Samuel 13, starting in verse 13. Samuel speaking to Saul. You acted foolishly, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. How many times did Saul mess up?
Before that?
Yeah, I mean, up to this point, how many times did Saul mess up? One time. One time Saul messes up as king, and God says, your kingdom belongs to somebody else now. I'm taking it away. You are flawed. You are not mine. So God strips him of the kingdom. Flip over chapter. Go ahead.
If Saul had repented and asked forgiveness, don't you think there might have been a different result?
There may have been, but what's the condition? Because Saul does repent. He says, oh, I've sinned. I've done wrong. What part's missing?
All your heart. Uh-oh.
There you go. It's not a matter of, it was like Phyllis was saying, she has somebody that she knows that does something, well, I don't know what it is, pops pills or something, or does something that she's not supposed to during the day, goes to sleep, or just before she goes to sleep, she says a little prayer, Lord, please forgive me for what I did today, wake me up tomorrow and make me good, and if I die tonight, I'll have to go to heaven, and it's all good. And then she goes to sleep, wakes up the next day, oh, good, I made it another day, I can do it again. And does the exact same thing. But as long as she gets to the end of the day, before she goes to bed, and prays her little prayer, oh God, please forgive me, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I'll be okay.
What happens if she dies at noon?
Is that with all your heart?
No.
Is that putting away, ridding yourself of false gods? False gods don't have to be a Dagon, fishy-looking kind of thing. False god could be your house, your job, your car. Yeah, there's many. Just think anything. Popularity.
Oh yeah.
I want to be the most popular person around. And so, because I want to be popular, I'm not going to say Jesus. I'm not going to do that Christian stuff. You know? So look in 15. Starting in verse 20. Chapter 15. We're almost finished. We're ready to wrap it up soon. 1 Samuel 15. Saul is replying. This is now the second time. Saul has been told, take the armies and go unto the Amalekites, and I want you to wipe every last single one of them out. Leave nothing alive. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Kill everything. It was part of God's judgment for the way the Amalekites treated his people coming out of Israel, or coming out of Egypt. Egypt. So here's God's judgment on the Amalekites. Here's Saul going to be the judgment arm of God. This is what God's judgment says. Do this. Completely and totally annihilate, kill absolutely everything. So and he doesn't. He saves some of the cattle, and he brings back their king, Agag. So here we go. Here's Saul's answer to Samuel. But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. The soldiers took the sheep and the cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. We did what you said. We slaughtered everything. I brought back King Agag. And we killed everything else. And the soldiers, they took the best of the best that was supposed to be set aside for you, Lord. And, we just brought it back so that we could sacrifice them to you and give you the honor and the glory. Gag. Gag. Here's what Samuel's reply is. Samuel's, okay, that's fine. I understand now. Not. Verse 22, but Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Smack, 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 smack. Now, what lessons do you get out of this little section? I want to leave you with a little something, not just history. I want to give you a little something. What do you get out of this particular passage? This little past story? Give me some principles that I can live by.
Do not do evil that good may come.
Do not do evil that good may come.
That's our excuse sometimes for doing something we shouldn't.
Oh, the means or the end justifies the means?
Right. Well, we brought back this stuff so we could sacrifice it to you.
Right.
When you told us not to.
Yeah, we can change the way how to worship God. And because we still worship Him, we think that's okay, and it's not okay. It's always exactly how to worship Him. So we gotta do His way, not our way.
That's interesting that you brought that up, because that's what I was getting at. My question, my notes here says, what does this sound like? And I put down the first table of the law. The first table of the law tells you how you worship God. You ever notice that? You shall, what's the first commandment? Thou shalt have no other God but me. That restricts your worship. You can't worship any God. You have to worship the God. And just before that, he says, I'm the God that brought you out of Egypt. I'm the one that delivered you. I redeemed you. I am the Lord your God. So my worship comes out of who God is. I have to worship the right God, obey the right God, follow and serve the right God. And I do that because He's redeemed me. Because He is God. And there is no other. What's the second one?
You should not make an idol for yourself.
You should not make any other graven idol or any image. That restricts the nature of our worship. We don't worship just any old way we want. That's what I get out of this one. What does he say? Do I delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices more than in obedience? More than doing what I have commanded? I commanded you to kill every last one. That's my command. You don't decide, because we want to glorify God a different way, that you get to disobey what I have said. But my heart's right. I'm really doing it out of the love of my heart. Lie, gag. You're doing it for you. That's what you're doing. And what happens when we go and we start defining and shaping the way we serve and worship the Lord, the way we want it to? We go astray.
We make a false God. We make
Yes.
a God that likes what we do.
Yes.
And that's not the God
Yes.
of the Bible.
And so God tells Saul, no, I want obedience. Because you did not obey my word, you are no longer my king. 2 times. 2 times it's sealed, shut down, delivered. First king, first failure. He doesn't get it. Saul, I'm so sorry. You're not the King of Kings. You're not the one through whom God can make His covenant come true. Step aside. King number 2 is on his way. So why is this important? Because God needs a king that will represent His faithfulness to His covenant people. God does not fail as a king. He never faltered. He never faltered and brought judgment upon His people as a result of His flaw, or His unfaithfulness, or His disobedience, or His rebellion. In order for the covenant blessing to be an everlasting covenant, God needed a perfect king. A perfect king whose character was not flawed. Who could be a king over His people and it never hurt His people. How many times, think it through the Old Testament, how many times you've read about the kings where the king did something bad and the people got punished? Do you remember that?
People suffered.
Apparently there does. No. Not good. Not good. And through that king, God would build a temple in which He would dwell. And not one that breaks apart and falls down or is corruptible, but one that is everlasting and forever. And that's what we're going to take. I want to take the picture of this king, God working towards this king, His anointed one. Psalms 2 calls Him the anointed one, my son. David's writing this, by the way. Yes. I'm going to bring my king. I will establish His kingdom. He will not fail His people. In fact, because of His righteousness, I, Father God, will be able to impart His righteousness onto you. I will be able to take blessing and put it on you. And because He's never changing, because He never falters, because He never sinned, never will, because He is forever established as King in heaven forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, you will always be blessed. You can't lose that. God's covenant with you, with me, with us, is an everlasting covenant. that he has built by establishing his king, Jesus, forever and ever. And because of his character, his righteousness, his sinlessness, his faithfulness, God's people can be blessed eternally, faithfully, forever, never to change. That's what I want you to see in this time frame. As we move through here, look, I mean, how many times have you run across a story and you went, oh man, God's harsh. That's harsh. All David did was count the people. Why should he have to choose between 3 days of pestilence or 3 days, 1/3 of the tribes dying, or remember all that? That's that. Why would why did the people have to suffer when David was one that did the bad deal? Because he's king. And God has appointed a king. And that king will be through whom, or through how his covenant's mediated. Does that make sense? Okay. It's also how his temple is created and maintained. So, keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this next study. As you're reading through 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, keep that in the back of your head. What is God doing? What is God doing? He's establishing his king. He's pointing for the need of the king. The law pointed to the need of the person who is sinless. Someone who could obey the law. Now he sets a king, and the king can't satisfy. No human king can satisfy the qualifications for the king. He needs a holy king who's going to make a holy temple that's not corruptible, that will last forever, and we're that temple. Okay? That's it for this time. Questions? Thoughts? Perusals? Wonderments? Think about it. Go home and just sit there and just ponder it. Because I'm still going, wow, that's pretty cool. Let's pray.